Today, we're going to jump in a time machine and head back to 1977. But forget the disco and bell-bottoms. We are on the trail of an incredible medical detective story, the moment scientists first started to crack one of cancer's deepest secrets, its family code. So, for decades, scientists were scratching their heads over this one big mystery. You see, while a lot of cancer cases seem to just strike at random, some families, well, they seem to be tragically and just inexplicably cursed by it. The big question was, why? And that really gets to the heart of it, doesn't it? Is getting cancer just a roll of the dice? Pure bad luck? For a lot of people, maybe. But for certain families, the patterns were just too strong, too consistent to ignore. It really suggested something else was at play, something being passed down from one generation to the next. The clue that finally broke the case wide open came from a study of more than 5,000 patients, and it all boiled down to this one number, 7%. Researchers found that 7% of these patients had 3 or more immediate family members with cancer. Now, this wasn't just a random statistic. It was a bright, clear signal in all the noise. Now, I know what you might be thinking. 7%? That doesn't sound like a lot. But for these scientists, it was everything. It was the proof they needed. For a small but very real group of people, cancer wasn't just random chance. It was inherited. And that single discovery, it kicked off a whole new field of investigation. So how in the world do you investigate a mystery that stretches across decades, even centuries? Well, the first thing you need is a map. And that's exactly what these medical detectives set out to create. Let's take a look at their number one tool. And here it is. This is a family pedigree chart. At first glance, it probably looks pretty complicated, right? Like a jumbled family tree. But this right here was the central piece of evidence. Every single square, every circle, every shaded-in symbol was a clue, and it helped researchers see patterns that were totally invisible otherwise. And you know what? You can be a detective here too. It's actually really simple to read. Squares are for males, circles are for females. Got it? Okay. Now, if a shape is filled in, that means the person had cancer. By just following the lines, you can literally trace how this trait gets passed down, from grandparent to parent to child. This is how they made the invisible visible. But let me tell you, creating these maps was some serious, painstaking work. This wasn't just about asking a few questions. Oh no. These researchers did incredibly detailed interviews. They dug deep into genealogy records, and they were meticulous about verifying every single tumor diagnosis. This was real, old-school detective work, building a case one family member at a time. So as these pedigrees started getting filled in, something really cool began to happen. The data started to talk back. The detectives realized they weren't just finding random clusters of disease. They were actually unmasking specific criminal signatures, which they started calling familial cancer syndromes. They pretty much identified 2 main types of these signatures. First, you had site-specific cancer. That's where one particular type of cancer, say colon cancer, just kept showing up generation after generation. And then there was the more complex cancer family syndrome, where a whole mix of different cancers, like colon and endometrial, all seemed to be linked within the same family. Let me show you a powerful case file that made this genetic link absolutely undeniable. It's called familial polyposis coli. This is an inherited condition that causes hundreds, sometimes thousands of polyps to grow in the colon. And get this, if it's left untreated, the chance of developing cancer was basically 100%. This was a total smoking gun. Okay, now contrast that clear-cut case with the pedigree for a cancer family syndrome. See all the different letters here? C for colon, E for endometrium. It shows a much more complicated genetic footprint. This is where a single inherited factor could raise the risk for a whole spectrum of different cancers. So what were the common clues across all these different syndromes? Well, 3 things kept popping up over and over again. First, the cancer showed up at a much, much earlier age. Second, it was really common for one person to get multiple, totally separate cancers in their lifetime. And third, the inheritance pattern, it pointed directly to a single, dominant genetic factor being passed down. So the clues weren't just buried deep in family histories. Sometimes, and this is pretty wild, the evidence was right there in plain sight, literally written on the body. And this offered an amazing shortcut for doctors. Just look at this. These outward physical signs, or what scientists call phenotypes, were like finding fingerprints at a crime scene. Specific little bumps on the tongue or unique skin marks on the face. These turned out to be telltale signs that a person was carrying the genetic risk for a very specific cancer syndrome. And this was a massive breakthrough. Think about it. These physical markers were essentially an early warning system. For the very first time, doctors could identify people who were at high risk, not after they got sick, but years, sometimes even decades, before cancer ever had a chance to develop.
So what's the lasting legacy of all this incredible detective work from 1977? Well, it fundamentally and permanently changed the way we approach fighting cancer.
To put it simply, this research built the entire foundation for modern cancer genetics. By identifying these high-risk families, medicine could finally shift from being purely reactive, treating cancer after it shows up, to being proactive, with targeted screening and prevention for the people who need it most. And what's so amazing is that the researchers themselves knew how huge this was. They wrote it right in their paper back in 1977. Their goal was to get this life-saving genetic information into the hands of everyday doctors. They saw a future where this knowledge could actually be used for prevention, and they helped create that future. And that brings us full circle, from 1977 all the way to today. The work of these pioneers really highlights the power that's hidden in our own family histories. It leaves all of us with a really critical question to think about. What secrets might your family tree hold, and what could they tell you about your future?